listeners, and welcome to episode number 156 of the National Land Podcast. My name is Matt Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty and your host for this episode. Now, today we're talking about soybeans, and I know we've dedicated a lot of conversation about soybeans. That's because they are one of the most high-impact commodities right now in the United States due to impact from tariffs and what we've seen as far as logistics with crushing facilities and transportation. This is a crop that is on the move right now, positive and negative, and we want to make sure that we cover all the bases. Now, today we're talking with Charles Hall. He is the president of the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association, which makes him kind of an expert on the topic. He's talking about North Carolina soybeans, but we talk about soybeans as a whole and how they're affected right now and what we can do about how the markets are moving and how producers are reacting and how little things, or not really little things, but things that we don't think about in the general public, like crushing facilities, really factor into the equation. Now, sit back and enjoy. It's a terrific topic. Side note, please subscribe to this podcast. We don't want you to miss the next exciting episode of the National Land Podcast. Also, make sure to leave a review if you can. Leave comments on our YouTube channel. Send anything you can. Check out our Facebook page and leave comments there. Whatever you can do for us to hear back from you, we want to hear back from you. Thank you and enjoy. Okay, and we are live. I'm here with Charles Hall of the North Carolina Soybean Producers, and this is your second time on. And so I guess the first thing I want to ask, before we throw everybody down the rabbit hole, Charles, tell us about your organization and your role, just so that anybody listening outside of North Carolina knows.
I thought you were going to ask about my pet dog behind me, why it doesn't move, but okay. I'm
going to do that, but
you're going to do that. I am Charles Hall. I'm the executive director at the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association. We're the farmer-facing side of the U.S. soy industry. We're the affiliate of American Soybean Association, which is based out of Washington and St. Louis, and we're also the checkoff board for the federal soybean checkoff in North Carolina.
And now that you've answered that, you got to tell the dog story, because you told me, and I think anybody listening would find the story funny.
Oh, well, the story is it's supposedly a coyote, possibly a dog-oody. My neighbor landowner back in Alabama shot it on my dad's place years and years ago, and he kept it in his old tin roof house. And one day he said, "This thing really scares my kids. Do you want it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I've had it ever since.
And then I didn't even ask before the show started. Are those are longbows behind you? Are those Osage?
They're actually hickory. I've made those.
Hickory.
They're not real great. I'm still experimenting with where to knock the air is on those things. They're hickory.
That's I always I love seeing fellow trad shooters, so that's fun. I like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So North Carolina Soybean Producers. Last time we talked, we were just kind of heading into this year. What has changed since the last time we talked? I mean, obviously there's a new administration and everything like that. But in terms of the soy markets, what has changed since the last time that we talked?
There have been some changes. One of the things that is constantly changing is the situation with China, and we can delve into China whenever you're ready. That certainly changes every few weeks, it seems like. One thing I tell you that's not changed though is that we are still operating very tight at the margin. And what we really need, a change we really need to see or would like to see, is for soybean prices to rally, because our input costs have remained high enough. And although we're having a pretty good year this year, we still got weather risk, we've got logistics risk, and profitability, is going to be elusive even in a year like this where it's relatively low key on the weather side. So, I'd say right now, other than the geopolitical changes, which seem to be headline driven, a lot of things are kind of fitting the pattern of the last couple of years.
And then, so I'm gonna jump into our questions here on, of course, I try not to catch people unaware, so I try to field questions to everybody that comes on here. and to help you gear up and to get us the most information possible. So what would you say, how would you describe the outlook for soybean farmers in North Carolina right now, as far as, I guess, projecting into the future?
Yeah. Again, it's good depending on where you are in our state and whether you planted full season beans or late season beans and what other crops you're into, how much corn you planted, maybe how much tobacco you planted. In general, what we're looking at is about 1.6 million acres of soybeans in the state. And the USDA has forecasted a very good yield for us this year. So beans are probably going to be quite abundant here. Farmers are rating the crop something like 75% good to excellent, which, the weather has cooperated this year. That sounds really good for us, but there's going to be a whole lot of soybeans looking for a home. And there was with the old crop as well. So these beans have to go somewhere. We don't really have a lot of storage in North Carolina. And in addition, I've heard it from my Midwestern friends. I heard it from the Pro Farmer Crop Tour that wrapped up last week in 11 Midwestern states. There's a whole lot of beans out in the Midwest. So they've got a big crop coming in. We're going to have a decent crop. We really would love to see soybeans at $11 a bushel. I don't know if we'll get there, but even that may not be enough.
And the side question, how long do soybeans store in terms of, keeping it aside? You mentioned there's not a lot of storage and they got to hit the market immediately, but is it a time related thing, or is it a storage capacity related thing?
It is both, and that's a great question. I mean, if you're a North Dakota farmer, you could store beans for years up there. They're so low humidity and it's so cool up there. It's almost like having them in cold storage. Down here for us, it gets hot in the summer, it gets humid in the summer. You might could keep beans a year here, but you're probably going to need to get them out for quality reasons before that. But the other thing is we grow other crops and we don't have that much storage. So when there's corn, when there's winter wheat coming, we got to get those beans flowing out in the markets.
And you mentioned our trading partners, and I mean that's really what comes in. Like, we have a lot of other countries that buy our soy product, right? So in terms of getting out there and getting new buyers, I'm going to jump right into it here. Like, how big is the tariff situation and how is it affecting what we're doing?
Yeah, it is affecting it quite a lot and in a couple ways. So on the marketing side, so in terms of just getting rid of these beans, whether they're North Carolina beans or Iowa beans or North Dakota beans. And by the way, I understand that basis in the Dakotas right now is pretty negative, and that's not a good thing at all. And honestly, basis in North Carolina right now is a lot lower than it should be for this time of year. And there's different reasons, but one of those is China. I mean, excuse me, I'm recovering from COVID. I apologize for the call.
Oh, no, I didn't realize that. Okay.
It is what it is, right? We're in a 90-day tariff truce that President Trump granted, which is a good thing. But what we've heard from China is just radio silence. China has not yet bought a single new crop soybean from the U.S. So that is really unsettling in a way. We need China to come in and to start buying the new crop. It's alarming enough that our national industry has just asked the president and the agricultural trade negotiators in Washington to prioritize soybeans in a trade deal, just like they've done with jet airplanes and with computer chips. So we were previously in a situation where China could take as much as 31% of U.S. production. This was in the years prior to 2018. And then we hit that trade war, the first trade war in 2018. That purchasing fell off sharply. It rebounded a little bit, and then it's fallen off sharply again. So that's tariff number one. Tariffs number two, tariffs part two, is the tariffs on ag equipment and ag inputs that have increased really quite a lot. So North Dakota State University did a study They said that on about $30 billion worth of ag inputs, the tariffs had increased from basically 1% to about 12%. And that's going to get passed on to farmers. So in a way, you could look at it as like 12% inflation because
I was going to say just like a 12% cost increase overall, right?
Yeah, because the producer's not going to eat it. He's going to pass it on. The middleman's not going to eat it. They're going to pass it on. It's going to trickle down to farmers. It's going to get passed on. Herbicides, insecticides, we used to get those in for about 1% tariff rate. Now it's in the range of 20% tariff rate. If you're talking tractors, it's going from basically 0 to 16% on average. These are the average effective rates. And crop nutrients, phosphate and nitrogen, was pretty much 0, and now it's going to 10%. So in a way, you could look at those rate increases as what's going to get passed on to the producers.
And what is this is going to vary a lot, but if you can give me a range or an idea, what is typical margin on soy for the producer?
In what year? Which out of 5 years?
I know that's why it's a bad question. And it is by the year because of things like inputs. But so like, let's say, 20% is a number that a lot of people throw out for a lot of products, right? So we could say if farmers typically make 20% and then they're getting, a 16% impact on tractors and a 10% impact on fertilizers. And then like, as you've named these through, I'm not going to get them right, by the way, but you've named off all these numbers, then you're talking about a margin where they typically make 20% on product that they can that is going to go to pay for labor, that is going to go to, buying next year's product as well. And then the rest is what they eat off of, right? And if you talk about them making 20% on yield on something like that, or 20% margin on the product, now they're making 10, and now you can only eat half as much. Is kind of, so that's where I was curious, like how much is that impacting the bottom line for these farmers?
Yeah, so I guess a typical farmer, there's a very, very, very general rule of thumb. If you take any 5 years, they're going to make money 1 year. They're probably going to lose money 1 year, and the other 3 years it's going to be right on the margin, right on the bubble there. But it's like any other commodity industry, because soy is a commodity. In the poultry industry, when I used to work briefly in that industry, we thought 5% was a sufficient margin to do a deal, selling frozen poultry. I would say soybeans, I don't know. I've never seen anybody actually compute it statewide or nationwide, but it's probably a few percent, right?
Yeah. And so again, when you look at a cost increase, like you have suddenly an industry that could break even or get close going significantly negative.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Farmers have choices. They can choose not to purchase as much crop protection product. They can choose to plant fewer seed per acre. There's all kinds of choices, but generally there's a lot of risk with those choices. Fewer seed per acre, you risk not having as good a stand. Fewer crop protection purchases, you risk having, fungus or a pest or some, plant disease or something. So it's got risk entailed with it, whatever choices they make.
How are we positioned right now versus other producers like Brazil?
North Carolina's positioned great versus Brazil, mainly because we have our customer right here in our backyard, and Brazil has their customer thousands and thousands of miles away across the Pacific Ocean in China. So North Carolina, for our producers, we've got 10 million hogs in the state. We've got upwards of 1 billion poultry birds, so layers, broilers, turkeys. That's our customers, and they're here where we are. And in addition to that, our quality is quite good. North Carolina just happens to be at this great latitude and this great environment where we grow really good soy. Protein content's high. We get pretty good yields, not quite as good as those Midwestern prairie soils, but we can produce a good crop, and it's quite close to our downstream customers. In addition, so the Midwest guys, they're a long way from us by rail. So Logistically, it's not that much competition, unless maybe producers in Ohio or Indiana that could rail soy meal, from their processors into the Carolinas. That certainly is competition. Where Brazil's really got us, though, again, is China. Brazil picked up a lot of that business after the 2018 trade war. They expanded their soy production area to meet that increased Chinese demand. We've actually opened a U.S. Section 301 investigation into that. Section 301's the portion of the U.S. Trade Act of 1974 that gives the U.S. Trade Representative authority to take action when to enforce U.S. trade rights. And so we think a lot of that expansion that happened on Brazilian soybean production was, maybe not technically, but in spirit, lands that, really shouldn't have been or had a production expanded on them. Here in North Carolina, elsewhere, we don't create new land here. We have the land we have, and we tend to lose it, not gain it. So that put us at a serious disadvantage against Brazil.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. And I was there's a question I was gonna ask earlier, and it sort of shot past it. When it comes down to and when we're talking about the tariff wars of 2018, like that's where we imposed the tariff on China, and their countermeasure was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like they don't tariff us back; they just stop buying. Is kind of how they operate it. So they don't exactly announce it. You just find out as your crop comes and nobody buys. Is that sort of how this year's going too? Like we're just kind of waiting.
Yeah, we are just kind of waiting. There is a tariff, and it is significant. So I think back in 2018, the tariff topped out. I may be wrong. I want to say like 16%, which was a lot.
Yeah.
Right now it's 20%, but I mean, it changes all the time. But before,
is that their tariff on us?
Yeah. So U.S. soy.
Oh, okay. That's I'm wrong there. I was going off of had an economist on here the other day that was talking about their policy of like they don't necessarily tariff, they just don't buy.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to dispute him either, but
I'm here to learn.
No, it's about 20%, but I mean, a month ago it was 34%. For some days there, I think it was 100 and something percent. It changes so much, which is another aspect of this current, just kind of week by week trade war. Is there's no certainty about what the tariff is, but this much is certain: whatever it is, it advantages Brazil. It doesn't really matter if it's 100% or 20%. It still makes our product more expensive than the Brazil product. Now, the Brazil product is grown in a tropical environment. Talking about storage, they can't really store it well. It's harvested very moist. It's in a humid environment. There's heat damage and degradation going on all the time, and they have to move it thousands of miles to the customer. So yeah, their product suffers quality-wise because of that. Our product our product has advantages logistically versus theirs, but they're cheaper than us right now. And so the Chinese are gonna buy, and certainly having the tariff on the U.S. product doesn't help, even if it's only, let's say, 20%, not 34%.
And if Brazil is allocated more land base to produce more soy, and their environment means they have to move it faster, they're probably a lot more amenable to negotiating, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they've been doing some interesting things with the Chinese. There's been some Brazilian-Chinese joint ventures in China on Chinese ports to build storage facilities in China for the incoming Brazilian soy. So they are clearly positioning themselves to take advantage of this situation.
Yeah, it makes sense. So as far as, we talked about input costs and, how those have changed and everything's gone up. Are there any kind of high risk factors on the horizon right now? Like what are we dealing with as far as what's impacting the production of soy that we need inputs for? Is it the weeds or disease, or what kind of what are we seeing? And I guess it's year to year. So this year,
it's always weeds. It's always weeds, and it's always this kind of creeping resistance to different herbicide systems that weeds develop over time. So you have to rotate through different chemistries to, prevent this resistance. It's just like, if you take the same antibiotic every day of your life, whatever's in your body that's harmful is going to develop a resistance to that. Weeds are kind of the same way. If you treat them with the same thing too much, they'll resist it eventually. They'll learn and breed and resist it. The progeny will. What's unfortunate, it is so hard to get new chemistries through the regulatory process. It's really like it's a 20-year process, let's say. We need new chemistries, new products faster, and that's very hard in the regulatory environment we've been used to these last years. And in fact, we've lost some chemistries. We lost the ability to use dicamba over the top of plants that had emerged. There's a new public comment period open on that, and hopefully that can change some things. New labels that are coming out for that product. But that's a big concern. Our arsenal of chemistries is somewhat limited. Weeds are always going to be a threat. Funguses, insects, always going to be a threat. And just like COVID, those things evolve. They're smart, they learn, and they do everything they can to trick us.
And explain the risk with like the controversy with dicamba in particular. And this is for those of you listening that are not involved in agriculture, so that you understand.
It's primarily an issue of drift. So there's been problems in certain parts of the country, sometimes including in North Carolina, where it would drift after application. It would drift onto a non-tolerant crop and cause damage to the crop. So it's basically an economic problem, an economic loss for some other producer that hadn't planned on using dicamba, hadn't planted a crop, let's say soybeans. So soybeans is in fact very susceptible to dicamba damage if it's not the soybeans that's bred to be resistant to it. So that's been the problem. The industry's been really good at creating new formulations with reduced volatility. They've been great with educating growers about when to spray, how to spray, what equipment to use. It's quite complicated, actually. How fast the equipment moves, how the nozzles spray the product, whether it's coarse or fine spray, what the humidity is, what the wind speed is. I don't know. Spraying nowadays to me is kind of like being an airplane pilot. You're constantly checking the weather, constantly checking your altitude and your humidity and all this stuff. It's just and our equipment has gotten a lot smarter too, but it's still an issue. Still going to be an issue.
And I didn't do this out front, but I feel like I should have. It just popped in my head to cover what is the market for soybeans in America right now. And we can go off of last year's data or year to date, however you want to do that. Or if you have it, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit on this one, but I'm just assuming with your role, you probably know it. Is how large is the market in the U.S.?
That's what. So I've either got COVID brain or I actually don't have it at my disposal. I can't remember the size of the U.S. market, so I'm gonna fudge on that one. But I'm going to say that I'm going to give you an alternative answer to that question. And I'm going to say that a bushel of soybeans, by definition, weighs 60 pounds. And out of that bushel, you get about 12 pounds of oil. And you get, a good processor can probably get 47.5 pounds of meal. And in the supply chain, that's what soybean produces. A soybean by itself doesn't really do anything for anybody until it goes to a processor and gets processed. And then you have a really great terrestrial protein that we mainly feed to animals. And you have a really nice oil that can go into cooking oil, salad oil, or renewable energy. So when you break it down that way, we've got a great market for the oil nowadays with the renewable fuels industry. And we've got a great market for the meal with our animal industry, with our offshore customers that raise animals. And for the whole soybean, we've got a great market for the offshore customers that want to buy the whole bean and crush it in their countries. But in the U.S., we've got, I think, we've got 66 soybean processing plants. We call them crushers. Those are the processors. They're in the business of turning, the little round whole bean into meal and oil as two primary components.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say the oil, but I didn't think of the meal. Yes.
Yeah, the meal traditionally has been, the driver of profitability in the industry. I guess it's the preferred protein for feeding pigs and chickens. It's abundant. You produce a crop every year. It's pretty reliable in terms of, how many acres, how much you're going to get. It's been very stable that way. But with federal and state renewable fuels policy, the value of the oil has actually crept up in value relative to the meal. So increasingly, it's the oil production that's driving those processor margins now as they're selling that virgin feedstock into the renewable fuels industry. So the answer to the question is, I don't remember the size of the market, but it's a pretty good market in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been our largest export. It's been our largest export for a long time. I just hopped on the USDA report too, because I was like, okay, what is that? It's around 24 billion is what total market value is 28 billion, but export value is 24 billion. That's what we're looking at, which is extremely significant. It is, and that's why in the export market being that high, that's why things like tariffs and trade impact that market so significantly. It's a huge impact.
So that's dollars, right? That's first point of sale. I'm supposing the dollar value. I do know this. I do know something. In North Carolina, when you look at the production of the crop, the processing of the crop, the jobs created, and use kind of the standard multipliers economists use, I think it's like a $1.2 billion industry in North Carolina, supporting probably about 4,000 jobs. And we are not at all the biggest soybean producing state. If you were to go to Iowa, it would be 20 times that or something, or Illinois or Indiana, or Michigan or somewhere. Even in North Carolina, where we grow a lot of other things besides soy, it's still a big economic driver.
One thing I wanted to ask you, just because of how things went last year, there were a lot of storms. We had hurricanes that came in and affected North and South Carolina pretty heavily. Did that have any impact on soy production?
Last year was kind of an odd year. We had heat and we had dryness, and then we had wet. We had a lot of rain at harvest time. That did impact the crop last year. It was an okay crop. It wasn't our best ever. This year's been a little different. We've had a lot of rain actually, but most people have gotten the rain they need, and most people have not had too much, which is good. So we're looking at a really nice situation. There's always the chance we could get a hurricane. These late season hurricanes really are a risk for us. They can put soybeans underwater. They can blow corn down. They can do a lot of bad things. So far, we've been lucky with that.
Are there any new sort of risk management tools that people are using in production of soy?
I think it's more the traditional tools, and we're continuing the push to improve the traditional tools. So we had a victory of sorts with the reconciliation bill, or the big beautiful bill. We got our soy reference price nationwide increased up to $10. We got the effective reference price, which is I'm getting into government policy here, but
we just actually did a previous podcast published last week was on that topic.
Oh, I won't belabor it then, but yeah, we got the wins for soy out of that. We have what we call a farm safety net, and the farm safety net is a set of policies that they are not put in place to make producers profitable. They are put in place to make producers survive when they otherwise would absolutely not be profitable. And we've always said that the safety net has hung about 6 inches off a concrete floor, which is, we've been through a lot of things in these last years, and rarely have we triggered payments under that safety net. Congress improved some of that in the reconciliation bill. They increased the reference prices. They made some improvements to crop insurance, make it more affordable, manage a little more of the risk. And they did some other interesting things. For example, treating LLCs versus partnerships. There were some different rules about how farm family businesses might have been structured. It would put you in a different category of payments from other people. Some of that's been simplified. So all of that's actually been pretty good for us.
I was going to say, yeah, the two bills that have gone through, like while the farm bill is still kind of hanging out, some of the provisions that went through, the two provisions, the two big ones that came through this year have been pretty effective on a lot of ag across a lot of fronts. Everything from, everything from soy to even wolf impact on beef. Like there's a whole bunch of things that have kind of helped out there. But I think everybody's still kind of hanging out and waiting for the farm bill to fully pass to see what we're going to do.
Yeah, so we got soy got a lot of things soy wanted in reconciliation, and specifically with the risk management side of the things we need, we got improvements. That's a definite. That was a win for soy. We're on the verge of getting some wins in the renewable fuels area, for example. So another set of government policies where we're on the verge of getting an EPA rule on renewable volume obligations made final. That will be a big win for us. But that's not risk management so much as market development. I think it's still the case that the farm safety net hangs mighty low to the ground. And, like I said, it's not to keep people profitable and easy. It's to get people through the hardest years. And we've had some hard years, and it really didn't trigger much. So we have been very thankful for the disaster assistance that's come in this last several months, for the assistance that came after the 2018 trade war. You really have to think of that as a way to indemnify farmers against some of the serious harm that they've undergone from this situation caused by a trade war with China or increased tariffs on inputs and equipment.
And you mentioned renewables. Are there any emerging? Do you anticipate any emerging technologies or uses for soy to impact the markets here in, say, the next 5 years?
The interesting thing in my career has been the transition from what we used to call soy biodiesel, which was sort of a desktop chemistry experiment in making a fuel, to the current situation with renewable diesel, which is molecules that are refined in a refinery, just like petroleum is refined, and can be turned into a variety of fuels. So we're looking at virgin soy oil for renewable diesel made by the major refiners, just like it can be made by farmer-owned co-ops operating traditional biodiesel plants. We're looking at potential use in sustainable aviation fuel, which is still, I guess, up-and-coming technology that's yet to be fully commercialized at scale. But right now, it's in those areas that are creating the big demand and tugging up the nationwide price of soybeans. And that demand is generated for the oil, which is a little bit new for us as an industry because, 10, 15 years ago, it was mainly about feeding animals meal. And now a lot of our concerns are more about encouraging the government to encourage petroleum refiners and importers and blenders to use enough renewable fuels blended into their petroleum products.
Is that, and this is just, I'm curious, and this might be exceeding both of our chemistry knowledge, but whenever people talk about renewables in agriculture, I think a lot of people automatically go to corn. What's the difference between corn and soy when it comes to that process, or if there is a difference or viability difference? Do you know what?
Oh, wow, man. I didn't go to the state technical university now, right? I mean, I was a liberal arts major, so you're
I'm serious. I'm going to have to hit the Google now.
I can answer this in a very, very layman's way. Okay, so yes, you could take soybean oil or any kind of liquid fat, really. You put a little methanol in it at a ratio of something like very little to a lot of oil. shake it up, and all the starchy, soapy stuff's going to sink to the bottom. You take that starchy, soapy stuff out, you pull that little tiny bit of methanol off, and what you got left is a fuel, and you can use it. It's got some difficulties in cold weather, and you can only blend so much of it. That's the traditional way of doing biodiesel, and that's a very, very ignorant way to describe it.
The best explanations I've ever heard on it. I feel like I understand it now.
Well, there's more. There's more.
Okay.
But
okay.
You can also take all of those fats, whatever it is, soy or white chicken fat or whatever the source may be, palm oil, whatever it may be, use cooking oil. You can put it in a refinery just like you can crude petroleum oil. You run it through a refinery. You use their whatever process, and you crack those molecules and rearrange them, and you get gasoline or naphtha or diesel or whatever you get. That's another way of doing it, and it's a very, very different process.
Now, you were joking about your college background. I feel like that those were all great explanations. It's good when things
probably wrong, but we do spend a lot of time on this in our industry. Right now, I would say in these last couple of years, that has been the focus of our industry, is the renewable fuel obligations that are coming up for the next couple of years. And the U.S. Treasury Department's tax credit is under a tax policy called 45Z, which is the tax incentive to do that. So those two bits of policy are really, driving demand for the product. And it's not the protein part of the bean to feed animals. It's the oily part to go into renewable energy.
No, that's great. You mentioned before, when we were talking about Brazil, and you mentioned that Brazil has made more land and you have the land that you started with and you're not making new land. Is there any competition with, do you find it as far as, let's say, the acreage dedicated towards soy? Is there sort of a battle going on, are you losing any land, gaining land share, in terms of production? Solar is one thing that came to mind as far as taking up former cropland kind of stuff. Is there any kind of impact on land utilization for soy product?
There always is. There's always a competition for acres, and generally in our state, it's what soy gains is usually at the expense of something like cotton, and it's always due to supply and demand. When the price of cotton is 70 cents, not $1, soy growers or corn growers are going to pick up some cotton land. When cotton goes up, people love their cotton. They're going to do cotton. People love their corn. Nobody really loves soy. I always say this, and I probably said it on the last podcast. If you ask any farmer in North Carolina, what kind of farmer are you? They're going to say, I'm a cotton farmer, I'm a corn farmer, I'm a tobacco grower. They're never going to say I'm a soybean farmer. The only people that really love soybeans are the bankers, because soy reliably makes money. But yeah, it's not a threat though. It's just, farmers are going to plant what they think they want to plant that year, and it's going to ebb and flow a little bit. So no, we don't necessarily have any big threat to the acreage. Now that could change here locally. If we were to lose an additional soybean processor in North Carolina, it could change the acreage outcomes for us. Now I'll tell you how that works. In the last 10 years, of those 66 soybean processors nationwide, in the last 10 years, I think 3 of them have closed, and 2 of those were in the Carolinas. One was in North Carolina, one was in South Carolina. And those plants are here because the animals are here along the eastern seaboard. If we couldn't crush the bean here, it would be harder to convince growers to grow the bean here because the basis wouldn't be quite as good. They would be competing with rail meal coming from those other crushers that are clustered out in the Corn Belt in the Midwest. So there is that. And in fact, ADM recently closed a plant in South Carolina. I think it was their smallest, oldest soy processing plant in the U.S. And why do they close it? Because they're going to invest in newer plants that are close to the major production in the Midwest, where they're sourcing the oil for biofuels. So
I was going to ask if there was an economic reason or a logistical reason for those closures. And it sounds like it was logistical, trying to just close down old things, open up a new thing with better location.
I think it's a little bit. What's the proximate cause? What's the underlying cause? I think the proximate cause on that one, it was a very old, fully depreciated plant held together with duct tape and baling wire. Yeah, that was one reason. But I think the underlying reason is if ADM is going to invest in expanding, maintaining, or even building new crush, it's not going to be here. Again, because when this virgin soy oil is driving a big portion of the crush margin, they're going to crush in, I don't know, Iowa. They're going to crush in Indiana or somewhere. They're not going to crush here. So I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that the what a farmer will say they are, because soy's just not discussed like a whole lot. I mean, it is like you do hear it, but it's like it's not as prevalent in headlines as say what you see with corn and stuff like that. And it's our largest export in ag. Like it's double the next export. I mean, it's a phenomenal chunk of commerce, and it's one of those like kind of under the radar thing. It shouldn't. I mean, it's not under the radar in terms of money, but in terms of topic and discussion, it's never at the top, and it's huge.
Well, I mean, part of that's cultural, though. Soy is not that old a crop for the U.S. I mean, if you look at the great literature that was written about or came out of rural America, I mean, people grew corn in the 19th century. People grew tobacco in the 19th century. Talk about Tobacco Road. I mean, there's a whole history there going back to the colonies. Cotton, there's a whole history going back to the colonies. There's a few crops that we don't grow anymore. We used to grow rice here. Rice is long gone. We used to grow indigo. Soy really only came in the 1950s, 1960s. So I think people don't really realize that. But in a way, it's a lot newer crop for us. So maybe it doesn't have that romanticism or that favor. But culturally here in the Carolinas as well, it was also kind of a crop that in earlier decades was not as intensively managed as it is now. It used to be kind of really a secondary crop in the sense that people were making their money on cotton or tobacco, and they would grow some soy because they had the land to do it. But they wouldn't devote maybe as much time and effort and money as they will nowadays. So I think culturally, the ascendance of soy has kind of been a more recent thing, if that makes sense.
Is that how it was used originally, as kind of a double crop, like, run your primary crop and then do soy afterwards? Is that ignorant speaking here? I don't know.
Yeah. From what I get from what little I know about it, I mean, I think a lot of the early experimentation in the Carolinas, it was a forage crop. People were going to grow it and bale it and feed it to livestock. Because, soy doesn't do anything for it if you don't have a processing plant. I mean, the beans are great, but if you can't process them into meal and oil, okay, well, you don't really have a market. And back then, when logistics was much more of a challenge, nobody's going to move soy from North Carolina to Pennsylvania or wherever. But then, the industry developed. We developed the crush industry we have. We developed the livestock industry we have, the way we do it today. And we needed that protein. If you want to see how that works, look what China did. That Chinese market didn't exist in 1991. It took longer for it to develop in the U.S. It took very little time for the soy market to develop in China. But as soon as Chinese consumers really started to consume animal protein, they needed the soy to grow the animals. They needed the crush plants to process the soy. And that has been within my adult memory, right? So it's just not that long ago.
So I wanted to ask you with North Carolina soybean producers, what's your top objective? What's your top priority for 2025? And it's weird to say we're nearing the end of 2025. I feel like it just started, but going into 2026.
Well, I mean, we are near or at the end of the crop year for sure. Our objective always is to enhance profitability. And this year, especially with the closure of that ADM plant that I mentioned, It's kind of upset our logistics a little bit. We had a lot of beans moving into the market late this year, for example, and that plant closed, and we had some other just infrastructure and logistics and issues at some of the processors. And that really stresses farmers. A farmer does not like to sit in his truck 6 hours waiting to deliver a load of soybeans, or to tie up a truck and a valuable employee for 6 hours sitting on line somewhere. So we've experienced a lot of that. There's no easy solution to it, but honestly, that's what we hear a lot about. And it's not an issue you can just snap your fingers and make it go away. It really is about the long-term development of new places, new markets to deliver beans locally, and we're going to work on that.
If you could say one thing to anybody who is not producing soy, to pay attention to soy, or inspire them to pay attention to those headlines or listen to the topic, what would you say?
Yeah, so like if you're a non-farmer, or you're a rural landowner, but you're not farming, or you're leasing land, there is a farmer out there, I guarantee it, that wants to give you a fair price for your land to grow soy and other crops. And I guarantee you that they want to be a good steward of your land and a good steward of your natural resources. And there's also a chance that farmer is a young farmer who needs a break. They need to pick up some land to get up to scale and be profitable. And you can really be doing them a big favor. So that's what I would say.
To a land sales company, that was a really unexpected answer.
Oh, really? I didn't know. I'm glad it was. I mean, in a good way, right? Tell me in a good way.
In a great way. And I mean, because one of the biggest issues faced with agriculture right now is barrier to entry. New farmers getting into agriculture is extremely difficult right now. So to your point, yes, that's a very, very good point. Nearing the end of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. Any questions I didn't ask you that I should have?
I don't think of any, but I'm happy to entertain anything you have left. I may be out of gas. Like I said, I'm just a poor liberal arts major that doesn't farm. I work at a desk all day, so I'll do my best.
No, I didn't have anything, but you did just break down gasoline production and renewables into layman's terms that I could understand. So I think you're doing all right for a liberal arts major. I think that's you're working well there.
I've got good people to check behind me. That's the
there we go. There we go. What's up and coming for North Carolina soybean producers?
Yeah, North Carolina Commodity Conference is mid-January in the great city of Greenville, North Carolina. It's our annual trade show and conference with the corn, wheat, and the cotton industry. So we're prepping for that right now. Got some great speakers coming in if you're a North Carolina farmer.
Do you guys have any trash talk at those conferences? Like, does corn talk trash against soybeans?
Especially university against university. Everybody here seems to hate either the University of North Carolina or Duke, and to love North Carolina State. So that's generally what it is.
I was just curious if you had like crop wars at those kind of conferences. I didn't know if that would be a thing.
No, we're so diverse here. You never know whose toes you're stepping on. You could really get some serious hot water when you start trash talking crops.
I can imagine. No, this is something you really. Like I said, you don't know unless you ask.
I tell you, we've had some crops that have come and gone. But when the tobacco program was bought out by the government, a lot of tobacco farmers that were smaller were looking for alternatives, and we had things like canap, ostriches. I remember meat goats, a lot of things that have come and gone. So I guess we could crash talk about those guys.
Yeah. We'll save the ostriches for now. We can do this. But anyways, Charles, I just want to thank you for giving us your time today. Really appreciate it. And hopefully, hopefully 2026 is a great year, and the rest of 2025 is as well. So thank you very, very much.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I appreciate it. I look forward to doing it again some year.
We will get you on here again for sure.
Thank you.
This concludes episode number 156 of the National Land Podcast. talking about soybeans with Charles Hall of the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com. And a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast, leave reviews where you can, leave comments on YouTube, check out our Facebook page. Anything you can do really to communicate with us. Like I said, we want to hear back from you. So thank you and enjoy your Halloween weekend. We are there. If you're listening to this after Halloween, maybe you have a Halloween weekend again. Maybe you do it again. Maybe it's January. You have Halloween then. I think that would be great. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.